Hello, my name is Sarah Blanchard, and this is the second critique for Landscape 199, spring of 2017. I have chosen to do my critique on tea, just the overall tea industry. I've just decided to do a simple PowerPoint presentation. I'm not very tech savvy and I've never made a video before or done any video editing. So hopefully this turns out and let's see how it goes. So I have selected tea because for years now I have drank tea, almost a liter of tea every day, and I have never taken the time to look into the production process, where it is grown, how it is grown, the social impacts on this, the environmental impacts on this, and I think it's my responsibility as a consumer, and especially being such a frequent consumer, to look a little more into it. So let's look at the tea industry in a whole. So tea is 5,000 years old. We have been drinking tea for 5,000 years. Besides water, it is the most common drink in the world. So the tea industry there's thousands and thousands of tea companies, but there's the two big ones, Tetley and Lipton, and that is a $1.5 billion industry. Combined every year, there are tens of thousands of pounds of tea that are shipped all over the world. And even though it is drank worldwide, there are only a couple of places where it can be grown. China is the main producer. It produces over 50%, and then India is coming in second. And then after that, we have Kenya, Sri Lanka, Japan, Taiwan, and a couple of other countries that do more smaller scale production. They might produce enough tea just for their country, but they don't ship outside of their borders. So most of the stuff that we are drinking is going to come from China and India. Tea is produced from the same plant. This is Camellia sinensis. It is a tree. It's supposed to be a tree, but in the plantations it's normally kept as a bush, kind of like shown here on the big plantations. They are kept really small because they are pruned so regularly. Like I said, all of the tea, besides, the herbs and the flavoring that gets put in it, is made from this one bush. And they take the top three, the new shoots of the fresh leaves, and then they make it from there. So the white tea is produced from the buds, the very end, and then the green tea and black tea are the second and third leaves. So the only thing that makes them taste different besides the leaves is the way that they're processed. So like I said, the white tea is going to come from the buds, the green is going to be unoxidized tea, and then the black is heavily oxidized, and then there's oolong tea and a couple other types of tea that lay along the spectrum there. So the tea processing is similar, but a little different for each different kind of tea. So as I said, the first three leaves are picked and they're always harvested by hand. This is a pretty delicate process, so it does require humans to intervene there. They are then laid out for several hours. Then they're going to be rolling. That's going to get out the chemicals. They're going to be laid out again, and then there's going to be firing. And the firing is just normally heat is applied, and that's going to get all of the moisture out. And then they're going to be sorted by quality. The overall process doesn't have a ton of impact. The processing part, it's all processing is done on site because this takes less than 24 hours. So there isn't actually enough time for them to travel from the plantation to another location to do the processing. So let's talk about the plantation in general. So there are 6,000 plantations around the world, well, in those select countries that I listed earlier, that are going to be producing the tea. And these plantations can be pretty widespread, so they can have some big impacts on the biology. This leads to deforestation. These are normally grown in tropical climates, so they have to cut down some tropical rainforest in order to get these plantations. And this obviously leads to habitat loss because what once was a rich, lush forest is now a monocrop. But overall, the agricultural crop of tea is a little more sustainable because a single tea plant can be used for almost 100 years, and this is because we're only harvesting those first couple of leaves, so there isn't going to be tilling. There's not going to be a lot of effects on the soil, so that's an upside. So the harvesting process, as I said, is done by hand. They're going to have hundreds of harvesters that are going to come and do this, and then they're going going to be dried, and then they're going to be fired after they're dried. And this is where the most environmental impact comes into this process, and that is because they will often harvest wood from nearby forests to light the fire or to work the stove. So that has the most environmental impact, is the deforestation. So let's often tea plantations are advertised as this very happy place for workers, and their tourists will come and look at the plantations because they're really beautiful. But there's often more to the story, as they're so the working conditions are really horrible for these people. They, in general, especially the ones in a developing country that tourists don't come to, they get paid about $1 a day, and this is very hard work. They're on their feet all day, they're carrying heavy loads, they're on uneven terrain. Sometimes these plantations will use child labor. And, of course, the companies like Lipton and Tetley that have these huge plantations, these are often the ones that have the worst conditions. So a lot of people are getting impacted. Here is a picture of the employees that are spraying harmful pesticides and herbicides on the plant without any protection. And this could lead to pretty serious health complications, and they don't have unions or any sort of protection to help them if there are severe consequences because they live on the site, and the living conditions are just horrible. They live in small shacks. There's going to be 20, 30 people. A lot of them don't have plumbing, or the toilets are overflowing. So it's just really a horrible lifestyle, and they're kind of trapped there. So I'm really upset and hurt that this is part of the process of a drink that I love so much. So on the other side, from the tea plantation, let's go on to the tea bags. So there are two main types of tea bags. Of course, there's loose leaf, but this is just for the tea bags. There's going to be the one on the left, which is the nylon tea bag. This is synthetic. This isn't as common. This is more in luxury teas. Tea flavor is really pronounced when tea has room to expand. So these nylon bags allow these teas to expand, but they are they're worse for the environment, and they're also more costly to produce, but they're not as common. So I'm going to focus on the version on the right, and those are made from organic material. These from the pulp of the abaca tree. The abaca tree is the only tree, as far as I know, that is used in the production of these tea bags. It's pictured on the right. It's very similar to the banana. It's not the banana, but it's its closest relative, and 92% of the pulp that is used to make tea bags come from the Catanduanes Islands in the Philippines, right there. And so these are big plantations, and then the bark and the pulp is stripped and then laid out to dry. And similar to the tea plantations, they have pretty horrible working conditions. There's not a lot of chemical use, but overall it's just not very sustainable. A lot of biodiversity lost, deforestation, etc., etc. After this, they are shipped out of the Philippines, turned into pulp. The place that I found that did the most of this was actually in Germany. So the pulp is processed and turned into paper. There's the two variations. There's the one on the top. This is the unbleached version, but most of the tea bags that we get are heavily processed with chemicals, including bleach, to make it appear white. Step is going to be the packaging. The tea leaves, along with some additional spices, and then the paper are going to come together. Normally, individual companies will do the processing themselves. There's three ways to do the packaging. There's the loose leaf, which is the preferable option. Then there are the tea bags without the strings and the staples, and then there are the ones on the right, or the lower right, that this is in each tea bag is in its own individual foil wrapper, which is in its own individual box. So there's just a lot of packaging and a lot of garbage when it's done this way. And this is one of the most environmentally destructive ways to store and ship tea. The next step, preparation. So the consumer has a huge impact on has a huge role in the impact of tea. So for example, how much water you boil and how you choose to boil your water has a huge a huge effect on the carbon footprint. The research that I did found that if you boil twice the amount of water that you need, then that's going to double the carbon footprint of this cup of tea. And that's pretty crazy, and I think it is pretty common that people have either a water kettle or they're just throwing water on the stove to boil, and people don't normally measure out exactly how much water they're using. So using an efficient way to boil water and using the right amount makes a huge difference. And also, if you use milk or sugar or anything else in your tea, that also really hikes up the carbon footprint of a cup of tea. So it can almost quadruple it or even 10 times more, a huge footprint depending on how many products you add to your tea. So looking at the tea, you can see on the left there's the light purple and the dark blue. Those are all what comes from the consumer. So, over 50% comes from the consumer. So the consumer can really play a big role in how much, how high the carbon footprint is on their tea. Overall, it's not too bad comparatively to other drinks. So the net impact of 1 cup of tea from beginning to end is 20 grams of carbon dioxide that goes into the environment. If you double that, or you double the amount of water that you boil, that's going to go up to 40 grams of CO2. So still, really, if you look at a latte, for example, a latte is 400 grams of CO2 and a beer is about 900. So 20 is not horrible. It says that if you drink 2 cups a day for the entire year, this is going to be the same as driving 80 miles in a standard car. So, considering how frequently I drink, I was actually pretty happy with how low the carbon footprint was. Of course, there are ways to reduce the impact. I think you should always buy bulk tea rather than buying in bags. It's kind of silly. I also included this image to show you the quality difference between loose leaf and tea bags. The loose leaf is the really nice stuff, the cream of the crop, and tea bags are often the leaves that are wilted or damaged. Sometimes there'll just be scrapings that they scrape off. So if you want really good quality and you want to be sustainable, you can do loose leaf. It's also really important to re-steep your leaves. That's one of the great things about tea, is that you can re-steep it up to 10 times, and every time you re-steep it, you get a different flavor. So by saving those leaves and reusing them, that's going to help a lot by reducing the impact. You can also save the leaves after you use them. They have a bunch of different uses. They have similar kind of qualities as baking soda, so they can absorb odors. So if you put a cup of it in the refrigerator, it's going to absorb the odors from your refrigerator. You could also sprinkle it in kitty litter, and that will help reduce the smell. You can use it as incense. If you burn it, it will turn into incense. So, there's lots of different uses, and then after you've done with those uses, compost your leaves. Don't, just throw them away. So that's my biggest recommendation for that. This is actually all that I have for my presentation. This has been a very enlightening process to kind of realize what is going on. My tea is a world traveler. It's been through several different countries to get to me. So I'm going to be a lot more mindful of the tea that I purchase and where it comes from, and also be a lot more present and mindful when preparing the tea and making sure that I'm doing it as sustainably as I can. So thank you for watching. Yeah.